I need to talk to you about what the internet was like back in 2003. Yeah, we've come a long way over the decades. Broadband was not commonly rolled out, and so internet speeds, they were less than a fraction of what they are today. Consequently, websites were much more static, quiet affairs than they are today. There were no responsive menus, only the most basic formatting and very, very few embedded videos. This is before YouTube existed and before Google rose to preeminence by outpacing every other competing search engine. And it was still common to step aside and ask Jeeves for help finding what you wanted instead. But the internet was fast becoming a great source for news, and one of the things that excited me and my friends the most was the news that there would be a sequel to Kingdom Hearts. There would in fact be 2 sequels, one on the PS2 and one on the portable Nintendo console, the Game Boy Advance. Both would advance the story. One would be set a full year after the original game, whilst the other picked up directly where the first stopped off. A private video was shown at the Tokyo Game Show to journalists who tried to describe in words what they had seen about the game, although they couldn't share the footage. Now, years later, we can all access this bespoke trailer, first hint the world would ever see about these games. But at the time, we had to make do with a garbled descriptions of Mickey Mouse dressed like a ninja and a kid dressed in white wielding a keyblade. We could, however, get our hands on the news that a special, updated version of the original game had been released in Japan, and it had a new special secret ending that hinted what was to come in the sequels. I remember the battle trying to download Another Side, Another Story, or Deep Dive, on my pre-broadband internet. It was a tiny thing, an MP4 file with awfully reduced resolution, so it showed up on my PC at about the same size as a postage stamp. But I adored the dark, gothic, tantalisingly beautiful world it promised. All of the ideas that the original game had promised, but twice as elegant, 3 times as scary and 4 times as awesome. Surely the PS2 could not handle something this amazing. Well, sure as hell, the Game Boy Advance certainly could not. The GBA Interquel, that provided a space between the original game and its true sequel, came out in 2004, only 2 years after the original game and a full year before the sequel would finally arrive. My brother and I bought it almost immediately because what was going to happen to Sora, Donald and Goofy after that heart-ripping ending? We had to know. Who were those figures in dark robes suddenly invading the franchise looking all ominous, dark and broody? The game was interesting. It was a sequel, true, and it brought new things to the table, yes, but I think it's fair to say that this was not the sequel we were looking for. To fit on the Game Boy Advance, the mechanics had to be radically altered to work, and the story was given an awfully trimmed down portrait scripts rather than the full cutscenes, but no. The problem is one that the franchise would always struggle with from this point onwards: repetition. Ostensibly, the game takes place in a brand new area, Castle Oblivion, and puts Sora against a brand new enemy, the scheming Marluxia. However, his plot was to force Sora to relive and thus rewrite his memories, turning him into a puppet that they could command and control as he would believe he did and always had worked for them. This means that for almost the entirety of the game, you're revisiting the same worlds and meeting the same characters as you did in the original game, only in a far less satisfying way. I have to credit the writers for coming up with minor twists on hackneyed Disney plots that put the importance of being there for your friends front and centre. In every world, Sora is assaulted with the pain of missing your friends, assaulted with the idea that you can care about someone but have to temporarily, or perhaps permanently, have to say goodbye and move on. However, the multiple repetitive battle rooms that you have to wade through on each of these floors to draw this threadbare narrative together, it's soul destroying. The problem, I think, is that I've never seen the appeal of card-based video game mechanics. I like card games in real life. I really enjoy some of them. But why would you take an action platformer and switch all of the commands, which are button presses, and replace them with one-time use cards? The system can be mastered, it does have depth, but the entire concept goes against the entire nature of an action platformer. I have No problems with anyone who really likes this mechanic and thinks it's a brilliant twist, but for me, Chains of Memories was a chore to replay. I hated the randomness in getting cards to build a deck. I hated the arbitrary limits on how large your deck could be. I hated running out of cards in a battle and having to either let myself die or hit, reload, hit, reload, hit, reload, unable to really combo any damage against an enemy with 20 times more hit points than it needed. There are two versions of this game, however. After you complete Sora's section, you replay the entire campaign as Riku, almost exactly in the opposite direction, coming up from beneath the castle instead. Riku never meets any Disney characters save for brief interludes before a boss battle, so his campaign is only half the length of Sora's, and all the card management requirements are gone. Instead, the game suddenly prioritises on-the-moment reflexes and the meta-story, where you finally get some explanations about Organisation 13 and the strange, ominous Diz. The game was re-released for the PS2 a few years later, bringing the 3D nature of the game more in line with the rest of the series. The card mechanics, as an integral part of the story, remain however and are just as irritating in the final version. I wanted more Kingdom Hearts. I wanted to see what happened to Sora, and so I suffered through this game to get them. It wasn't bad, it isn't all bad, but having replayed it now I have to conclude it just isn't, and it never was for me. For a temporary diversion, the systems here are interesting in concept, but fleshing them out into a full campaign causes each repetitive aspect to grate ever further. The story serves as an excellent prelude to what follows in Kingdom Hearts 2. Axel is a brilliant wildcard character, and the subversive hints about Twilight Town are genuinely exciting. But this was not, and never was designed to be, the sequel we wanted. That was waiting for us online, slowly revealing itself as my pre-broadband internet chunked away at each new teaser video, showing more and more exciting glimpses of what was to come. The sequel awaits.